Have you ever wondered what it feels like to set the perfect table, only to eat Christmas dinner alone? I spent weeks planning a magical holiday in my new Vermont home, hoping to bring my family back together. I cooked their favorite foods, decorated every corner, and wrote each invitation by hand. But when the big day came, I was left waiting in a silent house, my phone never ringing, my heart sinking with every passing hour. That's when I realized, sometimes the people you love most can hurt you the deepest. But what happened next changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible or left out, keep watching because this is the story of how I turned heartbreak into hope and finally found a place where I truly belong. He said to me, "Emma, maybe don't get your hopes too high this time." But I couldn't help it. Something inside me really believed this Christmas would be different. I had just moved into my new house in Vermont, a big white home with tall windows, a stone fireplace, and a snowy pine tree right outside the porch. It looked like something out of a Christmas movie. And for the first time in years, I had the space, the means, and the hope to bring everyone together again. So I made a plan. A big one. I invited my whole family to a Christmas dinner they'd never forget. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted them to walk in and feel, just for one night, that we were whole again. I spent weeks preparing. I ordered handmade decorations with our names on them. I found this cozy red and gold table runner that reminded me of Grandma's house when we were kids. I even asked a local bakery to make our favorite dessert, sticky toffee pudding, just like Mom used to try and fail to bake. The menu? A full 5-course meal, rosemary-crusted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted carrots with honey glaze, cranberry chutney, and a salad with pomegranate seeds and goat cheese. I cooked all of it myself. I even chilled their favorite wine. The invitations weren't texts, they were real cards. I wrote each one by hand, adding little personal notes. To Carol, I wrote, "I miss your laughter." To Amy, "Let's make new memories." To David, "You bring the calm we all need." I remember the night I dropped the envelopes in the mailbox. My fingers were cold, but my heart was warm. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a second chance. Still, there was a little whisper inside me. A quiet fear. What if they didn't come? What if they thought it was too much? What if? But I shook it off. This was Christmas. The season of miracles, right? A few days later, I got my first reply. Carol texted, "Thanks. Let's keep it low-key this year." I smiled at my phone, trying not to read too much into it. Then Amy said, "I guess I can make it." No exclamation point. No warmth. Just, I guess. David, always the peacemaker, wrote, "We'll be there if nothing comes up." That phrase stuck in my head. If nothing comes up. Like this wasn't important. Like this was optional. Still, I pushed the doubt aside. I wanted to believe in the best version of them. Of us. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe they didn't know how much it meant to me. But deep down, I wondered, were they planning something else? Did they already decide not to come? And if they did, why didn't they just tell me? I brushed those thoughts away and told myself, just wait. Christmas will fix everything. But looking back now, maybe I should have listened to that whisper. Looking back, I should have known. I really should have seen the signs. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was overthinking. But the truth is, their replies didn't feel like family. They felt like RSVPs to a stranger's event. I used my complete script-writing mind to replay the moments, trying to find where the truth was hiding. And the truth is, the distance had already started creeping in. It began with Carol. She used to be the loudest voice in the room, always first to call during the holidays. But after I sent the invitation, her texts were different. Short. Flat. She didn't ask what I was planning. Didn't even use emojis, which sounds silly, but Carol without emojis is like a tree without ornaments. She replied, "Thanks for the invite. Let's keep it low-key this year." I read it over and over. Low-key? I had already printed menus with their names on them. I had centerpieces with pine cones and gold ribbon. I didn't know how to keep it low-key anymore. Then Amy chimed in, and the tension thickened. She wrote, "I guess I can make it." That was it. No excitement, no can't wait, or what should I bring? Just I guess. Amy always had a way of making me feel like I was trying too hard. Growing up, she'd roll her eyes when I cried during movies or called her just to talk. This time was no different. When I sent a photo of the table setup, candles, holiday napkins, named cards, she replied, "That's a lot." I laughed it off in the group chat, typing, "Go big or go home, right?" But no one replied. Not even a LOL. David was the kindest, but even he felt distant this time. He said, "We'll be there if nothing comes up." That phrase sat in my chest like a cold stone. I had planned this dinner around them. What could possibly come up that would matter more? Still, I refused to panic. I told myself they're probably just tired. It's been a long year. They'll come around. But the days ticked by, and nothing changed. I kept dropping little reminders in the chat. Photos of the wine chilling in the snow, a video of the fireplace crackling, even a silly selfie of me in a Santa apron. No one responded. Not one. I started to feel like a stranger inside my own family thread. They were still talking, just not with me. I could see little things, likes on each other's posts, comments under photos. But when I'd speak, it was like I was invisible. I tried calling Carol one evening, just to check in. She didn't answer. Sent a quick text later. Busy. Talk soon. But soon never came. One morning, just a few days before Christmas, I got brave enough to call Amy. She picked up, her voice sharp and annoyed, like I had interrupted something. I told her I was just checking the head count for dinner. She sighed and said, "Honestly, Emma, maybe you're making too big a deal out of this. It's just dinner." Just dinner. I hung up quickly after that, pretending I had to baste the turkey. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the place cards. All their names written in gold ink. So much care for people who couldn't even call me back. Still, I didn't cancel anything. I kept prepping. I kept hoping. Because what else could I do? I told myself that the magic of Christmas would show up at the last minute. That maybe they were just being weird, and I was reading too much into it. I mean, they wouldn't do that to me, right? But as the snow started to fall that afternoon, and I lit the candles just to test how they'd glow on the table, I couldn't help but wonder. Why were they pulling away like this? Were they hiding something from me? Had they already decided not to come at all? I didn't know the answers. But something in my chest felt heavy. Like I was waiting for a storm that no one else could see. And part of me started to whisper again. What if you end up spending Christmas alone, Emma? What if this whole plan was only ever important to you? I shook my head and pushed the thoughts down. I still had time. They'd show up. They had to, didn't they? I used to love Christmas mornings. The smell of cinnamon, the quiet hum of holiday music, the excitement in the air. It always felt like magic. But that morning it felt different. And now, using my full scriptwriting expertise to look back and connect the dots, I realized something had already shifted inside me. I woke up early just like I used to when I was little. I stretched under the warm quilt, looked out at the fresh snow on the trees, and told myself, today is the day. They'll come. Everything will be okay. I had done everything right. The roast had been marinating overnight. The cranberry chutney was chilling. The table looked like a photo from a magazine. Gold-trimmed plates, real cloth napkins, polished silver. I even folded little red cards with each person's name on them, and underneath, a tiny message of love. Nobody knew about those yet. I wanted them to feel surprised. I wanted them to feel home. I put on my favorite red sweater and turned on the music. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, played softly as I set out the fresh bread. My heart beat fast, not from nerves this time, but from hope. I sent a quick, "Merry Christmas. Can't wait to see you all," 2 hearts, in the family group chat. Then I waited. Minutes passed. No reply. That's okay, I told myself. They're probably just busy getting ready. Or maybe still in bed. It's early. By 11 a.m., the turkey was in the oven, and I was lighting the candles. I sent another message. Just a reminder. Dinner's at 2. Drive safe in the snow. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Still nothing. I checked my phone. Not one red receipt. Not even a typing bubble. I told myself not to panic. but something in my chest felt like it was starting to close in just a little. By noon, I was pacing. I tried calling Carol first. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Then Amy. Her phone rang 4 times and then clicked off. No message. No, hey, I'll call you back. Just nothing. I called David. He picked up, but it was brief. I asked if they were on their way. He hesitated and then said, "Not sure yet. Might be a change of plans." A change of plans? My heart dropped. I wanted to ask what that meant, but before I could, he said, "I'll let you know, okay?" and hung up. I stood in the living room, phone still in my hand, staring at the empty driveway outside. The snow had stopped falling, but everything felt frozen. By 1:30 p.m., I lit the fireplace. Not because it was cold, but because I was trying to make the room feel warmer than it was. I stared at the flame, waiting to hear tires crunching on the snow. Footsteps. Laughter. Something. Nothing came. 2 p.m. The exact time I'd written in the invitations. I walked to the window and peeked out again. No one. The food was ready now. The house smelled like rosemary and butter. The candles were burning lower. The music felt too cheerful. I turned it off. Still, I waited. 3 p.m. I sat at the table alone, still telling myself, maybe they're just late. Maybe something small came up. Maybe they're still coming. I poured wine into everyone's glasses. Set out the hot rolls. Just in case. But by 4 p.m., the candles had started to melt into puddles. The food had gone cold. The gravy had a skin on it. I stared at my phone. Nothing. No call. No text. Not even a, "Hey, we're running behind." It was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit around you, but inside you. I looked at the plates, the name cards, the little notes I'd written in gold ink, and I felt my throat tighten. My hands were shaking now. This couldn't be happening. They couldn't just not show up. Not after everything. Not on Christmas. I stood up, walked to the couch, and sat down with a blanket wrapped around me. I held my phone like it might ring if I stared at it long enough. But deep down, I already knew. And then a thought whispered in my head so loudly, I almost said it out loud. What if they're not just late? What if they were never coming at all? What if they already had somewhere else to be without me? My fingers hovered over the Instagram icon. Something told me not to look. But something stronger said, "You need to know." And in that moment, everything I believed about that day was about to change. I told myself not to look. I told myself it would only make things worse. But sitting there in the half-lit living room, the food cold on the table, the wine untouched, I couldn't fight that feeling anymore. The one that had been growing since the vague texts, since the silence this morning, since the moment David said, "Might be a change of plans." Using my full scriptwriting instincts, the same instincts that helped me build stories from whispers, I followed that gut feeling. And in stories, when the silence gets loud enough, it usually means the truth is hiding in plain sight. So I opened Instagram. The app loaded slowly, like it knew what was coming. My heart pounded like it was trying to warn me. And then, without even searching, it was there. The first story on my screen. A post from Carol. It was a photo. My family, sitting around a long wooden table, plates full of food, candles glowing, laughter frozen in a perfect frame. They were smiling, laughing, together without me. The caption read, "Home is where the heart is red heart, Merry Christmas." I blinked. My eyes didn't understand what they were seeing, but my heart did. It understood instantly. They had made other plans. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been stuck in traffic or running late or still deciding. They had chosen to go somewhere else. To Carol's house. To celebrate, just not with me. I stared at the picture for what felt like forever. Then, suddenly, my phone slipped out of my hand and hit the rug with a dull thud. I didn't pick it up. I just sat there, the room spinning slowly, like I was watching the world through a snow globe that someone else was shaking. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in layers. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. Then this slow, creeping kind of pain like frostbite, starting in the fingertips of my heart and moving inward. I stood up and walked to the table. I looked at their name cards. I picked up Amy's and ran my thumb over the words I had written. You'll always have a place at my table. But she wasn't here. None of them were. They hadn't even told me. This wasn't a mistake. It was exclusion. I suddenly saw everything differently. The vague texts, the silence, the way they danced around confirming their plans. They hadn't wanted me to know. Because deep down, they knew it would hurt me. And they didn't care. My legs felt weak. I sank into the dining chair, the one at the head of the table, and put my face in my hands. The tears came fast and hard, like I had held them back for years, not hours. All that effort, all that hope, all that cooking, cleaning, decorating. For what? Not even a message. Not even a lie to make it sting less. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that they had gathered without me, or the fact that they didn't even try to hide it. And then I realized something else, something that made the pain sharpen. They had known I'd be waiting. They had chosen to let me sit here in silence, alone, on Christmas Day. They could have told me. They should have told me. But instead, they posted a picture. A pretty, happy picture. And in that picture, I saw the truth. I wasn't just forgotten. I was unwanted. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater, stood up, and walked back to the window. Outside, the snow was falling again. The world looked peaceful, beautiful even. But inside this house, the quiet was too loud to bear. I turned off the lights on the tree, blew out the candles, took off my apron. And for the first time all day, I stopped pretending. I stopped hoping. They weren't coming. And now I had to decide what to do with that truth. Should I call them? Should I scream? Should I cry harder? Or should I just disappear from their lives the way they had from mine? I didn't have the answers yet. But I knew this much. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. And now it was my turn to make one. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at the tree, the table, the room I had built with so much hope. The lights were off now, but my mind wouldn't stop flashing. That photo of them laughing. That caption. That fake little heart emoji. Home is where the heart is. That's what Carol had written. Well, it sure wasn't here. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about Christmas. It wasn't about this one day. It was about all the days, all the years, all the moments where I had been left out quietly, gently, in ways that didn't seem cruel at the time, but they added up. I picked up my phone again, my hand shaking, and this time I called Carol. Straight to voicemail. Of course. She always knew when not to pick up. Always knew how to disappear when things got uncomfortable. So, I tried David. He answered. His voice was low, like he already knew why I was calling. Hey, he said. Really? I asked. You all just went to Carol's? There was a pause. Then a sigh. Mom didn't want to split up the day, he said. We figured you'd understand. I laughed, but not the kind of laugh that comes from humor. It came from disbelief. From a place so raw. It startled even me. You figured I'd understand? I said. You figured I'd just sit here alone, with a full table and a cooked meal, and what, smile through it. I didn't know it was that important to you, he said quietly. I hung up. He didn't know. They never knew. Because I never said it. Not really. Not in the way that demanded to be heard. I always smiled. Always stayed quiet. Always played peacemaker. I thought that would make them love me more. But all it did was teach them I didn't need anything. That I didn't matter. I checked Instagram again, this time looking through the comments. Amy had already left one under the photo. Family traditions matter, red heart. I stared at it. That one comment was like a knife. A clean cut. And suddenly, I wasn't crying anymore. I was angry. Angry at them. Angry at myself. Angry at all the years I had bent over backwards just to feel seen. All the times I swallowed my feelings so I wouldn't upset anyone. All the times I let them roll their eyes at me. Make jokes. Tell me I was too emotional, too sensitive, too much. I wasn't too much. They were just too used to me being small. I walked into the kitchen, looked at the untouched food, and for a second, I thought about throwing it all in the trash. All of it. every last plate. But just as I grabbed the first dish, the doorbell rang. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood Nate, my best friend, my anchor, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa and wearing a fuzzy Santa hat that barely fit his head. "I had a feeling," he said. No explanation. No awkwardness. I stepped aside, and he came in like he belonged there, because maybe he always did. We didn't talk for a minute. Just sat on the couch sipping cocoa. Then I whispered, "They never saw me as family." He looked at me and said, "Then maybe it's time you stop trying to earn your seat at their table." I didn't reply. I just stared at the lights on the tree, the room that had gone from full of hope to full of truth. Because he was right. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared to admit it. But now that I'd said it out loud, now that I had faced the truth, what was I supposed to do with it? What comes after the breaking point, when silence and anger have both had their turn? Could something new really come from all this pain? After Nate left that night, I just sat there for a while, quiet, still, holding on to his words like they were a lifeline. "Maybe it's time you stopped trying to earn your seat at their table." It echoed in my head like a bell that had been waiting to ring. And now, using all the scriptwriting wisdom I've learned over the years, I can see it so clearly. That moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The line between heartbreak and healing is so thin, you can miss it if you blink. But that night, I didn't blink. I sat in the silence. And I listened, not to them, not to the pain, but to myself. There was still food on the table. Candles half burned. The tree twinkling in the corner, like it was waiting for someone to decide it still mattered. I took a breath. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to throw this night away. Not for them. Not anymore. So I stood up, straightened my sweater, and walked back to the table, this time not with grief in my hands, but purpose. First, I reheated the food. One dish at a time. It was no longer a feast for them. It was dinner for me. And whoever else might need it tonight. Then I lit the candles again. Not to impress anyone. Just to bring back the light. Next, I pulled out my phone, opened the local volunteer group chat, and typed, "I made way too much food. If anyone's alone tonight, my door's open. No pressure. Just warmth." I didn't expect much. But within minutes, the replies came. "I'm down the street, alone this year. Can I come? I was going to eat frozen pizza. This sounds better. Do you need anything? Should I bring dessert?" By 6:30, there were knock after knock at the door. 3 strangers. One neighbor I barely knew. And Nate again, this time with cookies and a silly board game. I opened the door to every one of them with a smile that felt honest. Whole. The house filled with voices. Laughter. The kind that doesn't sound perfect, but real. Stories were shared. Jokes told. Seconds served. People who didn't know each other 2 hours ago were now laughing over gravy stains and asking for wine refills. I looked around that room and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because for the first time I wasn't begging for love. I was giving it freely. And it came back, not from the people I'd spent my life chasing, but from the ones who simply showed up. We played games. We took pictures. I even turned the music back on. At one point, someone asked, "Do you do this every year?" And I laughed and said, "Starting now, maybe I do." I didn't need their permission anymore. I didn't need their approval to feel worthy. This night wasn't perfect, but it was real. When everyone finally left, I stood at the door alone, wrapped in a blanket, watching the snow fall again. But this time, I wasn't cold. I walked back inside, looked at the mess of empty plates and crumpled napkins, and smiled. This was what love looked like when it wasn't forced. And as I washed the dishes one by one, I thought, maybe I don't need to be at their table anymore. Maybe I've finally built my own. But even as I felt the warmth in my chest growing stronger, something else lingered in the air. A question. A whisper. Would they ever realize what they'd done? Would they ever try to make it right? And if they did, would I still want them back? That answer hadn't come yet. But I knew something far more important. I was no longer waiting for their invitation. I had written my own. The snow had already begun to melt by the time the letter came. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, no fancy card. Just my name, written in Carol's familiar handwriting. I found it tucked inside the mailbox a week after Christmas, when the house had gone quiet again. The extra plates were packed away. The leftovers were long gone. But the peace I found that night? Still here. Still growing. I stood on the porch, holding the envelope like it was something fragile. Like it might break if I breathed too hard. Part of me didn't want to open it. But the part of me that had finally stopped chasing approval, the part one had reclaimed, knew this wasn't something to fear anymore. I took it inside, sat by the fireplace, and opened it slowly. There were only a few lines. Emma, we didn't know how much it meant to you. Maybe next year. Carol. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just that quiet sentence, dangling between guilt and distance. We didn't know how much it meant to you. I read it again. And then again. And each time, I felt something loosen in my chest. Because now, using every ounce of storytelling wisdom I've gained in my life, I saw clearly what I had missed for years. They never knew because they never asked. They never asked because they never had to. I made it too easy to be invisible. But I'm not invisible anymore. I folded the letter and stood up. For a second, I thought about throwing it away. But then I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out a small wooden frame, and slid the letter behind the glass. I hung it on the wall, just outside the kitchen, where I'd see it every day. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a boundary. A quiet promise to myself. A line I wouldn't cross again. Later that night, I found myself writing. Not to them. To myself. I opened my journal and poured out every feeling I hadn't spoken aloud. Not on Christmas Day. Not the day after. Not ever. I wrote about the little girl who always tried to be good enough. The teenager who tried to blend in. The woman who built entire feasts, hoping someone would finally look at her and say, I see you. And then, at the very end, I wrote a single truth. Sometimes, the family you hope for isn't the one you're born into. I read those words aloud in the quiet house, and they didn't feel sad. They felt freeing. Like I had finally stepped outside a locked room and realized I was never trapped, just waiting for myself to turn the key. The next morning, I took down the name cards from Christmas and placed them in a box. But I left one card on the mantel. Mine. Because that seat, my seat, was never going to be empty again. I sat by the window, a mug of tea in my hands, watching the sky shift colors as a new year approached. I didn't know what would happen with Carol, Amy, or David. I didn't know if another letter would come, or if they'd call, or if they'd ever understand what they did. But that no longer defined my story. I get to choose how it ends. And for once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something else to begin. Because maybe the best stories don't start with family. Maybe they start with finally coming home to yourself.